Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are going to be looking at really the first big example of the faithfulness of Daniel. With that, turn back to Daniel chapter 1. We are going to be looking at verses 8 through 21, or the end of the chapter today. But we are going to be looking at Daniel's faithfulness and how you and I can still tap into that faithfulness and what we can do with that. Daniel chapter 1, verse 8. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink, for why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. So first off, we see the firmness of Daniel's beliefs and his faithfulness, and we see that just right away. And then we see this relationship with him and the chief of the eunuchs, and that the chief of the eunuchs comes to very much just be in awe of Daniel and his character. And a big part of that, though, is there is this request that Daniel makes that could not only get himself in a lot of trouble, but the chief of the eunuchs as well. It would be seen as a deliberate disobedience of the king, pretty much, as we see in verse 10. It would be very much a just blatant disobedience of the king, and that obviously would probably not end very well. And so the chief of the eunuchs makes a very honestly just a very straightforward question, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I don't see why we should do this. It's not going to end well. So Daniel, though, continues to be faithful and comes up with a plan instead. Verse 11. Then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned, over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, one quick note here before we see Daniel's plan. It again is such a testament to the faithfulness of Daniel, by seeing also the point that the author is trying to make by not saying or not giving the Babylonian names as they were supposed to have, supposed to be transitioning to a life of Babylon. Not only with Daniel do we see it in verse 8, but we see it with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in verse 11. So again, just want to make that crystal clear that those things are happening, and they are happening for a reason. It's not that the author just forgot their Babylonian names. No, he is doing that to make a point that they are standing firm in their beliefs, even though everybody around them is not doing that, and instead is becoming more and more like the Babylonians. Verse 12. Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. So, what Daniel is doing here is actually giving the chief of the eunuchs a way out, so he is not necessarily himself to blame. He's like, look, give us 10 days, see how we do. It's not like the king is seeing every single one of these young men in the court every single day. So it could be that these 10 days are like 10 days off or something, and it's not going to get the chief of the eunuchs in trouble. But then at the end of those 10 days, they are supposed to line up, and the chief of the eunuchs, before the king sees them, will see, okay, what does this look like? Can they do this? And yeah, let's see how that goes, though. Verse 14. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. So it's interesting, this plan. It does work. Is there a biological, scientific uh, point to this diet? Yes and no. Yes, there is a point where if you are eating just meat all the time, and especially if you're drinking wine all the time, it's probably not going to be the best thing for your health, even though it is a lot of protein um, when it comes to the meat. But so is there something there scientifically? Yes. However, I think the main point is that the Lord is working behind the scenes to make these men, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, to really stand out when it comes to the rest of them, especially when it comes to their character. It's not that their physical form is is the thing that is being looked at by the chief of the eunuchs. It is, okay, does our character play into what is going to happen at the end of these 10 days? Yes, absolutely. It's not like they were like, hey, let's go to the gym and get buff. No, it is, let us just completely just depend on the Lord. And at the end of these 10 days, we believe, not just we know, but we believe that God will do this thing. And he did. And the chief of the eunuchs sees that. And so immediately he's like, okay, obviously something really, really interesting is happening here. I will do exactly what you say. And so, because of that, they are rewarded. Verse 17. As for these four youths, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So, not only are they given physical appearance, that is, they are in good health, they are in good stature, which again is very important to have in the courts, especially with foreign ambassadors coming and going. But they are also exceeding and succeeding when it comes to their mind as well. When it comes to literature, wisdom, understanding, what Daniel, as we'll see in a little bit later, visions and dreams. These four young men are absolutely showing the signs of what it looks like when somebody depends on the Lord. Now, this does not mean that when you and I depend on the Lord that we are going to get buff, that we are going to just be able to eat vegetables and be perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that we are going to just know everything about everything that was written, know everything about wisdom and discernment just automatically. No, it doesn't mean that at all. It could mean some of those things, but it doesn't mean that just because you do what Daniel does, it automatically means that you are going to be like Daniel. No, it's all about the dependence on the Lord. If the Lord has called us to do something, this is where I really want to get at today. If the Lord has called us to do something, we are to depend on the Lord for that thing. We are to rest in the fact that he is faithful, and so therefore we are to be faithful to him, whatever that might be, whether it's a job decision, whether it is, okay, what school am I supposed to send my kids to, when your kids come home with okay, I'm being bullied at school, how do you respond to that? How do you teach them what to do? All those things we can depend on the Lord. Finances, just so many different things. We can depend on the Lord and we can be faithful to Him at the same time, even though it would be so easy to go in a different direction that everybody goes in. We need to stay firm in our faith. And we see that with these four young men. So, verse 18, at the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. So, there's a couple things here. Obviously, again, we see the good consequences of being faithful to the Lord, depending on Him. But we also see this note in verse 21 about the longevity of the mission that we are called to. Sometimes we are called to do something that is very temporary, that we are supposed to keep asking the Lord, okay, what am I supposed to do next? Well, for Daniel, he is given a mission. He does that mission exceedingly well, and he is to remain in that position for a very, very long time under different kings in order to help them out, which is incredible to see. And I think, too, it gives you a flashback to the history of Israel, because in the first year of King Cyrus, he proclaims that that Israelites um, can go back to Jerusalem, can go back home. And so I think there is this little bit of a note here that Daniel is faithful all the way up to the point where the Israelites are finally proclaimed to go back to Jerusalem, to the promised land. I think there's definitely something there. And it doesn't mean that Daniel then stopped being dependent on the Lord. It's not the case at all. But I think that's something a little bit behind that statement there is about the longevity of the mission that Daniel was given. So with that being said, we will take a look. We will go through Nebuchadnezzar's dream next week on Tuesday, and then we will break down how God reveals that to Daniel as well. So, with that being said, thanks for spending a little bit of time here with me today with the Broadman Word, and I will see you next week. Thanks.